Jaya Radha Madhavam Radha Madhav Kunja Vijana Vallabha Vijana Vallabha Saran Jan Saran Jan Iravancha Iravancha Yamuna Iravancha Yamuna Iravancha Jayadad Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Vardhana Gopi Jana Vallabha Vardhana Shodanandana Jana Shodanandana Vajajana Yashodanandana Vajajana Yashodanandana Vajajana Viravancha Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Jaya Damodara Radha 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 Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We will be. Sorry. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We will be reading from Canto 5. Krishna, the creative impetus. Okay, let's see. Just want to pull it up now. Okay. Proof is there, Bhagavatam. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Thanks. Chapter 3, Rishabhadev's appearance in the womb of Merudevi, the wife of chapter 3, and text 8. 8. So 5, 3, 8. Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Atman Atmana evanu savana anjasavya tireken bobu yamana shesha. Purushartha swarupasya kintu ashashanam etat. Abhisangradhana matram pavitum arhat. Do you want to try?
Yes.
Yeah.
Atmana evam nu savanam agyasavyati vekina bhupuyama nashesha purusharta swarupasya kintu natashisha ashasayanam etad abhya samradano matram pavitum arhati.
Thank you. Atmanaha,
Atmanaha,
self-sufficiently.
self-sufficient.
Eva,
Eva,
certainly.
certainly.
Nusavanam,
Anusavanam,
at every moment.
at every moment.
Anjasa,
Angisa,
directly.
directly.
Avyatirekena,
Avyatirekena,
without stopping.
without stopping.
Bobu yamana,
Bhuvuyamana,
increasing.
increasing.
Ashesha,
Ashesha,
unlimitedly.
unlimitedly.
Puru, Purusha Artha,
Purusha Artha,
the goals of life.
the goals of life.
Swarupasya,
Swarupasya,
the actual identity.
your actual identity.
Kintu,
Kintu,
but
but
Nata,
Nata,
O Lord.
O Lord.
Shishaha,
Ashishaha,
benedictions for material enjoyment.
benediction for material enjoyment.
Ashasananam,
Ashisananam,
of us,
of
who are
us,
always desiring.
who are always desiring.
Etat,
Etat,
this. Avisanradhana,
Avisamradana,
forgetting your mercy.
forgetting your mercy.
Matram,
Matram,
only.
only.
Pavitum arhati,
Bhavatamarhati,
can be.
can be.
Translation. All of life's goals and opulences are directly, self-sufficiently, unceasingly, and unlimitedly increasing in you at every moment. Indeed, you are unlimited enjoyment and blissful existence itself. As far as we are concerned, O Lord, we are always after material enjoyment. You do not need all these sacrificial arrangements, but they are meant for us so that we may be benedicted by your Lordship. All these sacrifices are performed for our fruitive results, and they are not actually needed by you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Being self-sufficient, the Supreme Lord does not need huge sacrifices. Fruitive activity for a more opulent life is for those who desire such material opulence, for their interest. Ayartat karmana nyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. If we do not act to satisfy the Supreme Lord, we engage in Maya's activities. We may construct a gorgeous temple and spend thousands of dollars, but such a temple is not required by the Lord. The Lord has many millions of temples for his residence, and he does not need our attempt. He does not require opulent activity at all. Such engagement is meant for our benefit. If we engage our money in constructing a gorgeous temple, we are freed from the reactions of our endeavors. This is for our benefit. In addition, if we attempt to do something nice for the Supreme Lord, he is pleased with us and gives us this benediction, and gives us his benediction. In conclusion, the gorgeous arrangements are not for the Lord's sake, but for our own. If we somehow or other perceive blessings and benedictions from the Lord, our consciousness can be purified and we can become eligible to return home back to Godhead. The text again. Atmana evanusavanam andasavya tirekena bhuvuyamana mana shesha purusartha swarupasya kintu nata shisha shasanam etat. Abhisang radhana matram pavitum arhati. All of life's goals and opulences are directly, self-sufficiently, unceasingly, and unlimitedly increasing in you at every moment. Indeed, you are unlimited enjoyment and blissful existence itself. As far as we are concerned, O Lord, we are always after material enjoyment. You do not need all these sacrificial arrangements, but they are meant for us so that we may be benedicted by your Lordship. All these sacrifices are performed for our fruit of results, and they are not actually needed by you. Om Gyana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshu Uniltangina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishtabi Talesh Mate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namaha. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharni Vishesha Shunavadi Paschatya Deshatarni. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll be discussing today how is it that we can satisfy the self-satisfied, one who's already satisfied. And how is it that you can be freed from work, and work itself is the cause of bondage? So Krishna, he answers a important question in the Bhagavad Gita. We are actually introduced to this concept, the juxtapositioning of these seemingly contradictory concepts, that the Lord, who is self-satisfied, is to be satisfied, can actually be self-satisfied. So that's one contradiction. And then the second contradiction is that the means of satisfying the Lord is also the very means that causes bondage. So how can this be? So in the third chapter, Prabhupada quotes a verse from the third chapter, Yagartat karmano nyatra loko yang karma bandhanaha. Tadartam karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. So we'll see what the meaning of that verse is shortly. So Arjuna, he asked Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita that, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruit of void? So remember, the first question, the Bhagavad Gita began from Arjuna's bewilderment and him actually taking shelter of Krishna. And so then Krishna chastises him and he says, how is it that uh, this this foolishness has overcome you? You know, you're an area. And so then he summarizes the Bhagavad Gita, beginning with empiric knowledge of the soul. And so there he discusses, then the hierarchy comes up as which is better, fruit of work, empiric philosophy, mystic yoga. And so the subject matter is, how can I actually be freed from bondage by actually killing others? Similarly, as well here, the performers of sacrifice in the court of Maharaj Nabi are also presenting this. Is that you are self-satisfied, um, and so all these paraphernalia that we have gathered here, um, all these articles to be offered, uh, the food stuff that is there, all the they list like the 8 things that you can offer to the Lord to actually get His benediction. They're actually not for your benefit. So externally, it seems like, oh, these sacrifices we have to perform to somehow maintain you, um, but actually they meant for our benefit. So So then Krishna begins to answer this question of Arjuna, is that why he should actually work. Okay. It says, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So, first of all, Krishna is going to actually say that renunciation of work doesn't actually may superficially free you from the mechanics of bondage, but the actual cause is not addressed. And what is that cause? It's actually contemplation on the sense objects. So when one contemplates the objects of the senses, one actually develops an attachment for them. So that contemplation, it's done through the mind. And so by merely ceasing the, as we've discussed before, the mind, it's the integrator of all the information that's coming from, that's coming through the working senses. And then there's the executive senses that are used for performing action. So that stimulation from actually seeing something very nice, touching something very soft, inhaling a nice aroma, the mind actually integrates all of that. So by merely stopping that, in that desire to actually act on it, it doesn't free you from the attachment that comes from the contemplation, because the mind has all, it's a repository for all these stimuli. So, yes, so that's what Krishna says. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Later on, Krishna will tell Arjuna that one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action is actually intelligent amongst persons. So, so basically, seeing the activities of the mind, seeing the activities of the intelligence, and seeing the activities of the false ego, um, when you actually see things through this lens, then you're actually are assessing. You're looking at things at a very fundamental level, the actual causes of bondage. Externally, if you just look at how the body is moving, how the body is shaped, what color it is, um, what comes out of the mouth, what goes into the mouth. These are all indicators of, the yes, the accumulated desire of the person within the mind. However, it's not the actual, um, yeah, it's not the fundamental cause. So, then Krishna, he proceeds and he says, one who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So he said one is actually forced to act helplessly, and merely by abstaining from work and actually not having a high engagement, then one is helplessly forced to dwell on the sense objects. And so then you are helplessly forced to be a hypocrite, a pretender. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior. So this is where Krishna is making his case. Yes. So one um, who actually makes the endeavor control the active senses. So abstinence from work, yes, it's an activity. However, the activity doesn't actually achieve the objective automatically. So one can say, oh, well, if I just cut off all the stimuli from the mind, then I'm actually controlling the mind because I've cut off everything. So it seems like logical and it seems like, the best thing to do. However, Krishna says no, there has to be an active control of trying to control the eyes, from going to these sense objects, trying to control, um, the ears from hearing mainstream media. There actually has to be an activity. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So prescribed according to what Krishna has said. So Krishna has said that one is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the material modes. So Krishna's system of the Varnashram, it's really, there is a natural hierarchy, a social hierarchy. And basically, according to the qualities that you've acquired, you'll be naturally located within, uh, the categories of conditioning that material nature affords. So, with the 8.4 million species of life, one could say, well, there should be 8.4 million um, varnas in ashrams. But Krishna is so clever that, yes, there's already a lot of varieties like that. So you may be coming from the animal species, um, you may be coming from another variety of humans. But Krishna is so clever that no, he can actually just create another social system to actually account for all those varieties. And so, and remember, these varieties are also produced from, a few elements. So one of the ac- actions, the causes of the creation is just three modes, and so to create then a social system of four orders, four occupational orders and four spiritual orders, it actually can be done. So the Lord has done that. So when you perform your prescribed duty, is that first of all, you get located, you have a teacher, and the teacher will give you the guidance. Then you'll get located, and then that is actually better than just logically thinking, oh yes, I should just go to the forest, or I should, not eat this, not eat that, abstain from honey because, or abstain from cheese because there's microbes, uh abstain from, yes, because I want to be non-violent, I want to be ahimsa. So if these Hare Krishnas are claiming to be ahimsa, why are they making cheese? Because they're using microbes, microbial rennet. Uh, they're fermenting milk with yogurt, which is bacteria. Um, why are they making honey as well? Because the honey, even if you could, you know, um, prevent the fatalities from beekeeping, uh, somehow if you could do it, which would be practically impossible, but somehow if you could do it, say if you had anima siddhi and you could actually become a bee yourself and just, or anima and mahima, go into the hive and somehow just collect the honey without the bees like fighting you and in a like a non-destructive way. Um, and there's no fatalities. Still, the principle of ahimsa says, no, you're stealing. You're not getting any permissions. There's one queen, you can't just insert yourself as a, proprietor of that honey. So you're just stealing. Right. So these are Krishnas, it doesn't, the principle of ahimsa seems to be very deficient. Even for the cows as well, you'll get emails regularly. How is it that one came in through yesterday, which is a commonly asked question. I can't wrap my head around drinking milk when you're taking milk from a calf. The cow is producing milk for a calf. So you are taking the milk of the calf. So a lot of things externally seem to actually be lesser, immoral, etc. But that's why Krishna is saying you have to look at the level, on the level of the false ego, the level of the mind. That's where the cause are. In other words, it's not just based on information from your senses, from your knowledge acquiring senses, but you actually need to see through the eyes of knowledge. So then Krishna continues. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. This is the verse that Prabhupada quotes in the purport of today's verse. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you'll always remain free from bondage. So Krishna explained to Arjuna in the previous chapter of Bhagavad Gita how this bondage actually occurs. So there's contemplation of the sense objects, and then from attachment, then from this contemplation, attachment develops. From this attachment, lust develops. So in other words, the propensity to enjoy separately. Uh, so this is anti-sacrifice. So the idea of sacrifice is that you are giving something to a high authority. Ultimately, you want to give it to the Supreme Lord. And, it's sacred. It's being done in the mood of of a divine being. And, you know, excuse me. And by you performing the sacrifice, then, you are giving something valuable to a high authority. So here, Krishna, it seems when he says from attachment, lust develops. So lust, the basic definition of lust is actually wanting to enjoy separately from uh, the source of the fruits of your labor. So, in other words, anti-sacrifice. So Krishna is basically saying that anti-sacrifice is built into the body. So there is a tendency not to sacrifice. There's more of a tendency to actually enjoy the fruits of that labor. Then he proceeds to say that from lust, anger arises. So where does this anger arise? Because you're trying to satisfy you, who's actually separate from the nature of the fruits of your labor. So, although you're a spirit soul, you cannot acquire, you cannot spiritualize like your food without performing sacrifice. Because the whole idea is that if you spiritualize your food, or you spiritualize your vehicle, you spiritualize your house, you spiritualize all your affairs, they attain to the same nature as you. And so once they've attained to the same nature as you, in other words, you're spiritual, then they'll actually give you satisfaction. But what happens is that when one actually doesn't perform sacrifice, the nature of the fruits of their labor is matter. And so because they are matter, there is no satisfaction. And when there's no satisfaction, anger arises. And Krishna proceeds to say, from that anger, there's a frustration. And then from that frustration, anger arises. When one is angry, there's a bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So basically, the cause of bondage is this basically cycle. And the big factor here is the bewilderment of memory, which causes the loss of intelligence. So, in other words, you'll just make a bad decision. So, when you do an activity, you're on the public internet. Mm, Krishna here says that if you're not going to do it as a sacrifice for him, then the tendency is to veer into a content that's actually not going to be for your benefit. Yeah. So the whole public internet, it's just like a sea of a bondage. There's things to be seen that shouldn't be seen. There's things to be heard that stimulate material emotion. And so Krishna is saying is that if you go, for example, if you just, merge your mind into the public internet, for example, That's one activity. Then the tendency is actually to enjoy it separately. Then Krishna proceeds to say, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because his performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. So here, Krishna is now introducing that actually yajna, it's not just for the individual performer. So Arjuna asking the question, how will me engaging in this ghastly warfare actually, how is it better? And he's really asking from a macro perspective, like for everyone, for all these hundreds of millions of you know soldiers on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. As far as I remember, was it 560 or something million soldiers that died?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, just a really vast amount of men. So how is it that us engaging in this warfare as a sacrifice to you will actually benefit everybody? Mm. And one could also have that question, and Prabhupada is speaking in a very bold way about the social impact of Krishna consciousness. How is it that it's actually the greatest welfare activity, us on the streets dancing, um, us talking to people about Krishna consciousness and all that? So Krishna, he's speaking from because Krishna has perfect view of all the causes of material nature, the chain, the reaction, the chain of action from, you know, the very tiny quantum level, because he is a super soul, to the very macro level, because he is one of his expansions is Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who is bigger than, he's sitting at the bottom of every single universe. And he's also outside of the universe. From his pause, as we find out from the Bhagavatam, from an expansion of an expansion, um, each universe is a bubble that is coming out of his body. So Krishna can speak from all levels of analysis. And so Prabhupada is saying this on the authority of Krishna. He's saying this, yes, he's saying this on the authority of Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself. That actually performance of the Sankirtan Yagya, it is for this age and it'll actually benefit not only you at home, you have some doubt in terms of what will free you from bondage, but if you do it, it'll benefit your community, your entire county, your entire state, your entire country, the entire earth planet. It'll just benefit everybody. So as we know, in terms of environmental sustainability goals, which is one of the influential factors in the contemporary society we live in, is that there's this idea based on different studies that yes, we are doomed. Yes, the planet is going to be destroyed, and so what is the one activity that will solve all of that? And according to the creator of the earth planet, he says perform the Sankirtan Yagya. That's the one activity. And that'll actually, um, so, so Krishna is answering, this question, yes, from a macro individual perspective. Yeah, from, yes, from a macro point of view in terms of the entire social order, and then from a micro point of view in terms of on a local level individual, and then a micro in terms of the actions of your mind, intelligence, and false ego. What will actually cut that chain of contemplation? So then he proceeds to say, uh, The demigods being pleased by sacrifices will also please you, and thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. So, in other words, all the necessities that you need, which are beyond, your sphere of influence as a human, in terms of rainfall, heating from the sun, uh, if you analyze it, process of photosynthesis, extraction of energy, so conversion of energy of photons from the sun by different plant life is the cause of so many products that human society actually needs. Food, um, and then building materials in terms of wood. Um, yes, and then there's also other minerals that are required that are actually deep in the earth, how those actually come to the surface. So Krishna is explaining that performance of the sacrifice actually keeps that moving. So the whole system of sacrifice, just like how if you have a disruption in the global supply chain, we had lockdowns a couple years ago. If there's a stoppage in that global supply chain, it causes so many bad effects. So many people are put out of jobs, there's shortages. Um, so even the economy as well, it's a very complex system, but it has to keep moving. And so similarly as well, sacrifices like that. It's like an economy of exchange that actually is based on getting satisfaction, um, and you exchange different byproducts which really aren't for haven't been produced by you. You need something, but you exchange it to different deities who are controlling this. So this is the bona fide way to actually pay your taxes. There's taxes which um, in the in modern society they aren't being paid for, like for example access to free content. So Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate free content because it's being really conserved by persons who have given up everything by the renounced order to actually present it as it is because it gets lost. And so actually Krishna's words being conserved for many millennia, for 5 millennia, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, conserving this activity is very difficult, but it's being done for free by persons who've actually given up their life. And one such person is the founder Charya of ISKCON. Because prior to his arrival, this Krishna's words, as they were actually inaccessible to most people uh, because because of a language barrier. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is seeing that the barrier actually has to be broken. In other words, the storehouse of love of God has to be broken by one who has tasted. Then he ordered Srila Prabhupada to actually um, make this content accessible. But otherwise, for you to access it, you need to take birth in India. For you to take birth in India, prior to that, you needed to have performed a lot of pious activities. So, in other words, sacrifice. But the price became really free. So, of course, if one is not benefited by a devotee, then even this content is not accessible. So now it's available on the internet, but how many people actually visit Vedabase, uh, .io to actually access Bhagavad Gita? So there is still a price. Um, you need some mercy from the devotee. So yeah, so this is a system of sacrifice which Krishna is speaking about, and we've discussed how it causes bondage from an individual point of view, and that Krishna, being self-satisfied, he doesn't need any. He's being worshipped by so many wonderful devotees. Prabhupada gives the example. so many thousands of temples in India. Why is it that construction of another temple, you may think that it's actually for the benefit of the Lord, but actually it's for your benefit, and it frees you from bondage because it basically spiritualizes the fruits of your labor, and in that, because the spiritualization process is that the reciprocation that the Lord gives is that He gives it in the form of prasadam. So the Lord, when He reciprocates with His worshipper, He gives prasadam. And because the Lord is absolute, what He touches with His senses, what He sees, what He tastes, what He hears, uh, all those paraphernalia that are offered in sacrifice, because the Lord makes contact with them with His senses, they actually make contact with His body. And so, in this way, they get spiritualized. And so they actually come to they attain to the same nature as the Lord. And so when your senses come in contact with that prasadam, then, then you are actually satisfied. So as we know, even from a neurochemical point of view, and this was nicely discussed by Prem Kishori Devi last night at last night's Chaitanya Charitamrita class, about the difference between Shreyas and Prayas. So Prayas is that which is more attractive, and that is pleasure. So pleasure for the senses. And then Shreyas is that which is it's going to require some sacrifice because there's delayed gratification. You only will be able to enjoy it later on. And so that is really what will satisfy you as a soul. From a neurochemical point of view, what happens is that the pursuit of sense gratification, um, the yes, the chemical that is secreted in the brain that you get pleasure from is dopamine, and dopamine is actually even more addictive than cocaine. And so that's sense gratification. It's mechanics on a biological level. And then um, achievements such as, getting a degree, um, you perform a sacrifice, getting second initiation. Then from a neurochemical point of view, all this is happening, but of course, at an ontological point of view, something else is happening. But just from an external point of view, is that any activity that required some sacrifice, what you'll feel is serotonin, which is the chemical that you get great satisfaction from. So, from an ontological point of view, um, if the activity is completely spiritualized, then that pleasure obviously cannot have neurochemical origins. Uh, so, Krishna, he then says that basically the cause of bondage is you being a pleasure or satisfaction seeking entity. So because we are the same nature as Krishna, we're always looking for satisfaction. But we get deluded by the pursuit of this pleasure. And so we get trapped by dopamine. We get addicted to dopamine. So when you perform these acts of sacrifice, you basically um, free yourself from this addiction from sense gratification. And then you then also free yourself from material satisfaction. So, material satisfaction, which is in the mode of goodness, there is some attachment. You just feel content. Oh, I know so much. I can just walk in the forest and I can explain all that I'm seeing with my eyes. All these people are working so hard, but just see, I don't have to work. I'm still able to eat. I'm still able to sleep. I don't have to be under the sway of lusty desires. Um, you know, And my defense, yes, because I know the Lord is is the master of all, or because I know that I cannot be killed by any weapon, I can never be dried, then you don't perceive any danger. So that's this satisfaction is good, but it's in the mode of goodness. And mode of goodness is material, and so what ends up happening is that you get attached to that way of life, so you can't go beyond that. And going beyond that is actually seeing who am I in relation to the supreme source of everything. And who I am is that I'm actually an eternal servant of Krishna. So for persons who are caught up in the material satisfaction, material mode, satisfaction from the material mode of goodness, they don't see the need to actually perform devotional service. And as a result, the highest destination that they can acquire is the Sayuja Mukti, or merging into the Brahmaj Yoti. But the Brahmaj Yoti doesn't have um, full scale ontological shelter because you, as a spirit soul, need relationship. You actually need to act on that which you are. And so, if Krishna, appearing as Lord Chaitanya, is saying Jivaru Swarupoi, Krishna Nityadas, that's actually the platform where you'll never have to be bonded again to, you know, the cycle of birth and death. Mm. Hare Krishna. So, there is a question from Godruma Gora, one of the chief cowherds on the farm. He says, how do we respond to those accusing us of taking milk from calves? Um, yeah, so this frequently asked question, the way we respond to it is our model is that we don't have a breeding program, and so the cows, we can see they are giving their milk naturally without biological stimulation from having had a calf already. So why are they continuing to give their milk? So we can see that lactation in cows is not strictly a biological phenomenon. So just like if you had to somehow, this is quite a costly thing to do, but if you had to create a dairy from humans, from human mothers, quite costly. Um, that yes, it would seem like very cool, that there's these human females and you're just extracting their milk, taking away from the babies. But with cows, it's different. Cows actually, they give more than the calf actually needs. For example, with Shanti, her mother, fortunately, she passed, but she would spend all day with her mother, so she would get as much milk. And her mother was still giving 50 pounds of milk every single day. So her mother was producing more, way more than the baby actually needed. Similarly, even when the babies here, we are observing is that when the babies are fully grown and they've been weaned off their milk, of their mother's milk, and suppose you didn't wean them off, the mothers would still continue to give. So as far as our experience goes, is that when you treat the cows with care and affection, their affection actually transcends their own species. And so when you're milking there, so you're there, performing the milk. She's looking at you, you looking at her, and you're doing this every day. And it's just an exchange of affection. So as far as she's concerned, she just sees you as her calf. So that's what cows. That's the kind of relationship that they can enter into with humans. And so you give them their feed, you give them what they need. They reciprocate in the form of milk. Of course, after some time, they can dry up and stop giving milk. But the point is that they give more than what calves need, and they can enter into that same affectionate relationship with a non-bovine. In other words, you as a caretaker, and they can give you their milk. I hope that answers your question, Odrumagora. Yes, you have a question. Okay, so let me give you the mic. Oh, oh, sorry, let me.
So you mentioned about the dangers of access to the public internet. And if we look at the two youngest generations,
Mm,
uh, so like millennials and Gen Z,
mm,
um, internet addiction
mm,
is a serious problem.
mm,
Uh, whether that's addiction to something specific like pornography
mm,
or just general,
mm.
like, wasting time online,
Yeah.
things like that. Uh, so when we start getting these people wanting to come and live in our ashrams,
Mm,
right? So other, I guess, forms of addiction, like drug use, alcoholism,
mm,
gambling, there isn't so much facility in the ashrams,
mm.
right? Because we don't have those substances or
Right.
activities.
Yeah.
But of course, in every ashram, at least in the Western world,
Yeah.
there's more or less free access
Mm,
to the public internet.
mm,
And of course, some like a large part that's needed
mm,
for service.
mm,
So how do we balance the two realities
mm,
of uh, mm, having this public internet access
mm,
that's needed and that we
mm,
don't necessarily want to restrict for everybody,
mm,
but with the reality
mm,
that there will be people who, at least at the beginning of their practice of Krishna consciousness, won't be able to control their use
mm,
if it's available.
mm. Okay, so this is a question regarding management. Is the people who have an addiction coming into the society of devotees, an addiction where the sense objects are also present in the temples. In other words, we're supposed to provide protection from these sense objects, but they are present. So how do we actually manage it? Yeah, so it's a management thing, and depending on the severity, there's like so many apps that are developed. So the person's access has to be restricted. So there's like different parental control apps. There's one I heard, it's called a Canyon. In this one, it's quite different how it works, is that the others they work by like restricting access. Whereas this one, the way it works is that it gets routed through, they have a VPN, and all the traffic that's going on to your device, it gets routed through their VPN. And so it's basically scanning the information.
Mhm.
And so unlike the others, it'll just restrict the whole site. Whereas they will like prune, so for example, if you search something, um, on Google, and then you click the images tab, the pictures which are deemed inappropriate for the settings, uh, then basically those pictures you won't be able to see. Or so you can still see the results of your search, but they basically have applied their filter to those results. So any web page, even on social media as well. So the person can also go on Facebook, and then inappropriate content, it actually just gets removed. So that's different. That's one method. Using these apps. What personally worked well for me was like just not having a device for like 6 months, and just using like a basic device. Because it's like strengthen establishing streaks. Ultimately, anyone who has an addiction and they come into the society of devotees, we want them to be strong enough to be able to resist, the temptation. So, in other words, they may still have access, but if they've matured in the sense control, then they can just regulate themselves. You want to achieve that. And so the pathway to doing that in the beginning usually involves like taking that stuff away.
Mm.
So the computers, the person's devices, if they have these apps, then I think it would help them in the beginning. And for different people, they may need like a 2 year streak, 1 year streak, 4 year streak, to actually just be nicely situated in their practice. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions? We have 1 minute left.
I'd like to thank you for a nice class. Um, really, really appreciating this particular verse. Um, Throughout this chapter, we touch on a bunch of wonderful and deep concepts that I really appreciate. This, in particular, the concept that by serving Krishna, you are actually serving yourself, is a wonderful and extraordinary thing. It's maybe difficult for some to understand in the beginning, but Krishna, of course, is the super self. Um, there is the self, but there's the super self, who is Krishna, and by serving him, we actually are serving ourselves, and that's it's a wonderful thing to realize, and becomes an extraordinary impetus for service when you realize that your sacrifices, all that you give away, all that you do in service to Krishna, actually uh, comes back to you manyfold. Anyway, I'm finding that to be a really nice meditation. I would love to hear more about that if there's something you could contribute. Prabhu, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, so it's open up, but maybe we can discuss it during tomorrow's class. Thank you for the conversation.
Jaya Prabhupada, my Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Guru Chara, Padma, Bhakti Sadhvan. Fatima, Swami.
Nanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Gadadhar Srivas Uravakavinda Shri Krishna Shri Prabhu Nityananda Yadvaita Gadada Niva
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Sri Sri Radha Krishna Prabhupada Ki, Navan Ki, Pradhan Ki, Navadi Bhagavatam Ki, Shri Bhagavatam Ki, Gangamai Ki, Nunamai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Osadevi Ki, Samadeva Bhakti Ki, the Lord Shri Radha Damodar, Adita and Vishaka Ki, Krishna Divorce of Ki, Dharma Province of Marani Ki, Dharma Nandi, odorless to some of the bodies, odorless to some of the bodies, odorless to Gorana, odorless to Master, the only body on which you maintain, which says, I love to go and sweep the bread all around. Neither gives anything cost of worship to itself. Maintain this. This was done by consciousness purified when the words of the things of us come. Attachment to the Holy Spirit is a perfection of the feeling in this. The organs of my heart and feeling is in the heart of Jesus and knowledge. He is my Lord. Honor is sacrament. It's I am ancestors. Very spiritual singing character. Ours virgin masters mission is. And then foreign masters. All anything else to us. There's the shame in those who are in respect of the females. We take shelter to the products. Jagat Guru Krishna Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, devotees, thank you for coming this morning. Thanks, Tarko Prabhu, and see you tomorrow on Ram Navami. Hare Krishna.